بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على النبي المصطفى الأمين محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا ما شئت سهلا ولا حول لنا ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. ربي يسر ولا تعسر وتمم بالخير. ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي آمين يا رب العالمين. And once again we're here to discuss some of the ethics and adab regarding conversation and regarding how we can really try and maintain the best of etiquettes and principles when it comes to speaking and communicating with another human being. And when it comes to speaking, whether it's conversation at home or whether it's conversation in the car with the passengers, whether it's conversation to a pedestrian who's walking in the park, what's the best way to conduct ourselves when we speak to others? Because when we look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, we find an example of someone who was soft, someone who was lenient, someone who was gentle, and someone who uplifted others through the way he spoke. He had a soft demeanor, a gentle disposition in the way he treated others. So when people spoke to him, they felt better than before coming to him. And perhaps that's an important way of assessing the way we communicate. When someone communicates with us, do they leave in a better position, with a better feeling in their hearts, in their mind, than before coming to us? Because if the opposite is true, then that's a problem. If we have a tendency to be provocative, to say hurtful things, to use the wrong words, to speak in a way that's harsh, using derogatory words, then people, of course, are not going to want to come to us. Hence the reason why the Prophet ﷺ is told by Allah, وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. Had you been someone who was harsh and tough, then people around you would slowly go away. And that's true. If you think about a human being who's a bully, bullies don't have friends. People don't like to be next to them. But the Prophet ﷺ was very inviting in both his body language and also in the way he spoke, in the way he conversed. And so in this sense we find that there are many wisdoms in the life of the Prophet ﷺ in the way he interacted with others. And perhaps the starting point before we go on to some of the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ is to look at how the example in the Quran, when we look at the examples in the Quran, we see many examples of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam when they engaged in da'wah, the way they spoke to their parents and the way Nuh alayhi salatu wasalam spoke to his own son and the way he spoke to his own people. We find in the case of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, whose father was the very problem. He was the one who used to make false idols and he used to erect them and place them in places of worship so people would come and prostrate to them. Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, he spoke to them still. He spoke to his opponent, who was his father, with utmost courtesy. And he said, Ya abati lima ta'budu ma la yasma' wa la yubsir wa la yughni anka shay'a. Oh my beloved father. He didn't say father. He said, my beloved father. What do you mean beloved? And he is the very cause of all of your pain and worries and problems? Yes. Because he recognizes that existing relationship. And he recognizes that no matter what, he's my father and I must give him that respect. And so he says, Ya abati lima ta'budu ma la yasma' wa la yubsir. Why is it the case, my beloved father, that you worship that which has no faculty of hearing, has no faculty of seeing? Wa la yughni anka shay'a. It can never bring you any benefit. These idols that you worship can never bring you any benefit. Ya abati inni qad ja'ani min al-ilmi ma lam ya'tik. Father, my beloved father, there has come to me a certain knowledge that has not come to you yet. Look at that. I mean, Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, in other words, he's not boasting that he's a prophet. Neither is he boasting that, look, I've been given a special status by Allah to his father, but he's saying it in a very gentle way, that there has come to me a certain insight that has not come to you yet. It's beautiful because it's almost like he's careful not to tread on the wrong path with his father. He's careful not to provoke his father, because the father is generally the one who's young. The son is the one who's young. The son is the one who learns from the father. But in this case, we find that it's the opposite is true. Ibrahim ﷺ is teaching his father. Ibrahim ﷺ is the prophet. The father is the one who is in need of Ibrahim ﷺ's advice. So he's careful not to put it to him in a way that's going to hurt his feelings. And so he doesn't say, you don't know what you're talking about, to his dad. You know what you're talking about. I'm the Khalil of Allah. I'm the prophet. I know what I'm talking about, trust me. He didn't say it like that. Right? A lot of people in today's generation, unfortunately, because our elders may not be so accustomed to today's technology, and they may not be so savvy to social developments, right? When the father or mother are asking questions about whatever it may be, okay, the child is quick to remark, say, oh, you won't understand, you don't understand these things, or no, this is today's world, or I know what I'm doing, trust me, leave me to it. No, that's not the way to speak. At the end of the day, you were in a position where you were vulnerable and you had no clue about life, and it was your parents who taught you. So you should object with respect, object with courtesy, and that's what we find in this beautiful example of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam, the way he puts forward this, da'wah to his father. He's saying, oh my beloved father, there has come to me a certain knowledge that you don't have insight to yet. It's almost like he's including his father. He's saying, no, you are also worthy, you are also someone of knowledge, I accept that, but it's not come to you. This particular insight has not come to you yet, subhanallah. مَا لَمْ يَأْتِكَ فَاتَّبِعْنِي أَهْدِكَ صِرَاطًا سَوِيًّا. So if you follow me, then I will lead you to the right path. Subhanallah. It's a beautiful conversation. I would advise all of you to read it in Surah Maryam, the conversation between Ibrahim ﷺ and his father, which really sets the right mood and temperament for our discussion today, which really deals with the dynamics of discussions and conversations in Islam. Of course, conversations is something that as human beings we enjoy. It's part and parcel of being a human being, to be able to converse, to be able to express what's in you, and to be able to also receive information, and to be able to learn from others is something that we enjoy. Everybody enjoys a good gup-chup. Everybody enjoys a good, the classic sort of sitting room discussion, with some chai and biscuits, and just talk. And Umar radiallahu anhu says that لولا أطايب الكلام مع الأحبة لتمنيت على الله الموت, which basically means that had it not been for the good conversations with my brothers, with my believing friends, then I would have asked Allah to take me a long time ago. Can you imagine that? He said, had it not been for the good conversations with brothers, then I would have asked Allah to take me a long time ago. Because conversations can really uplift us. It may be that you're struggling in life about something, and it may be that you strike a conversation with someone who has a certain insight, and that conversation uplifts you, makes you feel good, gives you a different perspective of life. And hence Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that one of those people who are going to succeed are those who advise one another. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. Those who advise one another upon truth and upon patience. And that's something that you and I need to think about. The types of conversations are important to us. But when talking about the ethics of discussion and conversation, there's a few things that we have to bear in mind. Before I speak, I need to think. What is it that I'm going to produce? Because words are, of course, the product of letters, and letters are pronunciations of the sounds that we make, okay, through our makharij al-huruf, as we learn in tajweed. We make sounds. Those sounds have to have meaning. Now, it's important that we think before we talk. And this has two considerations. The first is the content of what I'm about to say. What is it that I'm going to say? And the second is, how am I going to say it? So the first is content, and the second is construction, the way I'm going to say it. And it's very important that we pay attention to both of these things every time we talk. Because if we speak without thinking about how we're going to say it and what we're going to say, you're going to end up slipping up. You're going to end up saying something wrong. It may be that you have the best of intentions, you have the best of meanings, but you've not thought about how you're going to say it, and so you give the wrong meaning because your word isn't right. So it ends up being counterproductive. It may be, for example, you go home and you see your lovely wife, for example, and you want to say to her that she looks, mashallah, beautiful and pretty. But instead of using the right words, and you have the right intentions, you say, mashallah, you look like a muffin, for example. And you like muffins. Nothing wrong with muffins. I enjoy blueberry muffins, you do as well. Exactly. And she might think, what? How dare you? All these days I've been working out to look good for you. And you say, I look like a muffin, but then you sort of have to apologize. No, I don't mean like the shape of a muffin. I mean like as good as a muffin. Like I really enjoy. No, all khalas, it's done now, right? It's a dead conversation now, right? So you want to say something nice, but you've used the wrong words and you got yourself into trouble. And so that's counterproductive. And it may be that at the same time, that you have the content wrong and the way you say it is good. Maybe the construction is good, but you got the content wrong. And so in terms of the content, you have to make sure you know what you talk about. Don't talk about something you don't know. If you don't know what you're talking about, don't talk. Because we heard from the Prophet ﷺ, the hadith that we mentioned in Sahih Muslim and many other riwayats, that the Prophet ﷺ says that whoever believes in Allah and whoever believes in the last day, let him speak good or remain silent. It's implied in that speaking good, okay, the presumption is that you know what you're talking about, right? It has to be genuine, right? So part of that means that the content has to also be right. You can't embellish a point that's wrong, right? For example, if you've misheard that somebody passed his exams, for example, and today a lot of, mashallah, the exams results have come out for GCSEs, and mashallah, a lot of people have done well. But if you've not ascertained that this person has done well, or you misheard, or you don't know what they're talking about, you go, oh, mashallah, I heard that your exam, mashallah, you did really good in your exams, well done. And he's failed every single one of his exams. Then imagine how he's going to respond. He's not going to be very happy. So you have to make sure that the content is right, and you have to also make sure the construction is right. Both of them are as equally as important as the other. And when we talk about content and construction, you know, one of the poets, he says that لا يعجبنك الخطبة من خطيب حتى تكون مع الكلام أصيلا. He says that, look, I'm not impressed with a speech given by a khatib until he has some real substance to what he's going to say. What does he mean by that? He says, إِنَّ الْكَلَامَ لَفِي الْفُؤَادِ. He says, true speech is that which is stored in the heart. وَجُعِلَ اللِّسَانُ عَلَى قَلْبِهِ دَلِيلًا. And the tongue has been given as a tool to express that which is in the heart. So in other words, if you just blab on, and if you're verbose means that you just speak a lot of words that are empty, then people are going to clock on that this guy is just a person with no meaning. And they say that the empty container sounds the loudest, doesn't it? When you don't have anything in the container, you bang it, it's like you hear more, the more bass you hear. But you have more content, okay, people will recognize that you have content. So it's important both that construction and content is properly thought about before producing your words. Because once you say your words, that's it, you've published it. You've published what you've had to say. And you can no longer take it back now. You can't withdraw what you've said. I mean, even if you were to sign a withdrawal form of some sort, I withdraw what I said. Well, you've said it now, it doesn't matter. Right? It doesn't matter. It's going to be held against you or it's going to be held for you. And you certainly can't withdraw anything from the courts of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from the malaika who have already taken record of what you've had to say. Can you imagine the Prophet ﷺ, once he's in salah, he's praying, and then when he said, Rabbana lakal hamd, one of the companions said, Rabbana lakal hamdu hamdan kathiran tayyiban mubarakan fih. Said, Oh Allah, for you is praise multifolds, for you is abundance of praise. Tayyiban, like good praise. Mubarakan fi, and blessed. These praise are blessed. After the Prophet ﷺ finished his salam, he said, who said that? He said, I did. He said, لَقَدْ رَأَيْتُ بِضْعًا وَثَلَاثِينَ مَلَكًا. I saw over 30 angels coming to snatch what you've said in your prayer. Just a statement invites the malaika or it actually repels them. So it's very important that we're very careful about what we say. It's very important. The second consideration we should have when we speak is the tone. What I mean by the tone is the volume. I also mean the way we say it, the gesture that we have. All of that forms under tonality. We shouldn't be harsh because the Prophet ﷺ was never harsh. And he ﷺ, when he heard our mother Aisha radiallahu anha replying to someone who gave a very derogatory remark to the Prophet ﷺ, because there was a man who was from the opposing community. He came to the Prophet ﷺ and he said, Assalamu alaikum, which basically means that death be upon you. And it sounds like Assalamu alaikum, but actually Assalamu alaikum means death be upon you. And so when Aisha radiallahu anha heard that, she came to the defense of the Prophet ﷺ, and she said, and death be upon you, and Allah's curse is upon you too. And the Prophet ﷺ told her off and said, no, don't say that. And then he went on to say that if you are gonna respond to someone who's gonna be, who's gonna say something derogatory, only give them back what they've given you. That's it, no more. And then he went on to say, sallallahu that innama bu'ithtu la'anan. He said, I was not sent as a prophet of curse. So the Prophet ﷺ is very careful about what he said, and also the tone. He was very careful not to respond to the same tone as his opposition. And so in terms of tone, one of the great Imams, he said that even if a person is aggressive, he said, be like a tree, kun kashajara. Be like a tree. That even if people were to pelt you with stones, all you give them back is fruits. You give them back thamara. Now of course that doesn't mean that you should be taken advantage of. Somebody comes and bullies you, takes your money, and then you should just give him back, some Ferrero Rocher and give him back flowers. Of course, we're not saying that. But the point being is that in our day-to-day communication, one of the ways you can soften down someone's harshness is by showing them how they should speak. Quite often, people who are provocative don't know otherwise, don't know how to be less provocative. People who are harsh sometimes don't know how to be otherwise. But when you speak to them in the right manner, they learn from you. Something inside them, there's a moral antenna inside them that will actually, right? When they go back home, they're going to think, actually I spoke to him quite harshly, but he responded with softness. And perhaps that will make them think about the way they speak. And that's something that we should also consider when we speak. So tonality is very important in terms of the tone that we use. Of course, getting the tone right is important. We shouldn't speak so harshly and with so much force and with such high volume that you were almost practically shouting all the time. If you do that, sometimes you do speak to people and they're quite forceful and they're quite shouty. You think, man, I need to invest in some earplugs next time I come and speak to this guy. And then on the opposite side, you have people who may speak so softly that you think, man, I need to invest in a microphone next time I go and speak to this guy. You need to make sure that you keep a balance in terms of the tone that you're speaking. It's not so harsh, and it's not so loud, and at the same time it's not so quiet. And we learned from the hadith that we studied in the first few circles of the Prophet ﷺ, when he would enter upon a home where people were sleeping, he would speak with such a volume that it was sufficient for the person who was awake to listen to him and fully engage with him, and the person who was sleeping, he would not be disturbed. So regulating our volume is also part and parcel of one of the considerations that we should give when we speak to people. And then we talked about words, and we said, look, we should choose the best of words. And I also give an example of that our predecessors would choose their words just like the way they would choose their food, and they would make sure that their words are chosen just like the way we choose our food. We have to make sure it's halal, and we have to make sure it's tayyib. We have to make sure that the food that we choose is good and halal. We have to also ensure that words that we choose also are good words and halal words, and they're also good, they're uplifting words. In this sense, we find that even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells Musa alayhi salatu wasalam that when you go and speak to Fir'aun, speak to him with soft words. فَقُولَا لَهُ قَوْلًا لَيِّنًا. Go and speak to him with soft words. Say a soft statement. لَعَلَّهُ يَتَذَكَّرُ أَوْ يَخْشَى. Perhaps he might be reminded, and perhaps he will become in awe of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Perhaps he may actually turn to Allah. Can you imagine this? Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is being told by Allah to go and face the enemy of Allah and to speak to him. I mean, this is the same guy who's been brutally killing and murdering little babies, who's being placing the Jewish community, the Banu Israel, into these horrible confined settlements, okay, and who's really divided the nation and who's caused anarchy. And Allah is saying, part of your diplomacy and part of your da'wah and part of you being effective as a communicator on behalf of Allah is go and speak to him softly. So perhaps he might be reminded, and perhaps he will turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can you imagine that? One of the leaders in our history, I think it was Marwan ibn al-Hakam or Sufyan ibn Marwan, somebody walked into their Amir, who was the leader at the time, into his palace. And he said, I'm going to give you a piece of advice today. And he was like really hot and red, and it's like, I'm going to tell you the way it is. And the leader, he just turned around and he said, listen, chill out, take a chill pill, okay? Because neither are you better than Musa, and neither am I worse than Fir'aun. In other words, you're not better than Musa, that you should choose harsher words than him, and he spoke softly to Fir'aun. And neither am I worse than Fir'aun, that you should opt for harsh words. So if Fir'aun was deserving of soft words, then you better be careful when you speak to me. Soft words gets the heart. It's as simple as that. Because the Prophet ﷺ also says that قد تنال بالرفق ما تناله بالشدة. It may be possible that you obtain something that you want with softness, okay, and by being pleasant compared to being harsh. If you be harsh and if you're forthright, you probably won't get what you want. But if you're soft and you're pleasant, if the police stops you and you've done 120, I'm not encouraging you, but if you ever do, and it's clearly got it on camera, right? And some people in the moment just think that, just don't worry about it. I'm just going to tell the police officer off for pulling me over. And he's pulled you over. You've clearly done 120. Okay, and then you're like, what do you want? What do you have a warrant? Do you have a warrant? Show me a warrant. Where's your ID? Can I have your badge? Tell you, you're clearly in the wrong. If you want to get away, do you think you're going to get away by being harsh and being provocative to the officer? Somebody sent me a video of someone doing that, and I was like, that's counterproductive to the situation. You're not going to resolve a problem by being harsh to a person who's in authority, at least, within the limited authority. But the point being is, that's not the way you speak. If you apologize, show that you were wrong, perhaps on a human level, he might be minded to let you off. And let me tell you, it's happened to me. It's happened to me when I've said, I accept. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking properly. I was, I didn't realize the speed limit. Please, I hope you can just, let it go this time. We've all been there. Something like that, something nice. The police officer might just give you a slap on the wrist and say, okay, if I ever catch you again, then, But if you're there provoking him, which office do you come from? Who's the superintendent? Which office? No, do you have any witnesses? I wasn't speeding. I was doing 40. And you start becoming provocative. It's only going to take you down a downward spiral. There's no prospect for you of success. But if you were to be constructive by conceding, and let me tell you, one of the powerful ways of winning a debate is by what we call concession. Concession is by accepting the weakness in your arguments. If you say, I accept that I'm wrong, that actually, on the face of it, it seems like you're losing, but actually you're winning, because you're sort of bringing him onto the same page. And that is also important. So, in other words, it's important to realize that at times, being gentle and soft, okay, just like Musa alayhi salatu wasalam was, it can really win over. It can really win over the other person's emotions, that they can be more inclined towards your position. And so tone is very important. The way we come across is also very important. Another point to really take on board, timing is also very important. When we speak to other people, it's also very, very important. Imagine a person is really tired after a long day of work, and you want to speak to them, you want to talk to them, and you're longing it out, and the other person is really tired, and you can tell by his body language he doesn't want to listen to you. You're holding them in place, and they don't want to listen to you. That goes against the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, because the Prophet ﷺ, we learn that he ﷺ would go and ask the companions, when is it good for you to speak so that I can engage with you? كان يتخولنا في الموعظة كان يتعاهدنا. He would go and he would consult them, and he would sit when it was appropriate, and he would sit with them. So that's also very important. Once Imam Abu Hanifa, the great scholar, somebody said to Imam Abu Hanifa, how dare you say that a person behind the Imam doesn't have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha? How can you say that? And they were getting really and then Imam Abu Hanifa said, okay, I'll tell you what, why don't we meet later after Salah, and then we'll speak then. Because he realized that, the temperaments were high. And so they all met after Salah. And then he said, what's the issue? He said that, well, you claim that the people behind the Imam don't have to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. He said, yes, it's true. He said, how? He said, because the Prophet ﷺ says that the recitation of the Imam is in place of the rest of the followers, meaning it represents the rest of the followers. Yeah? That was the position of Imam Abu Hanifa. And then he said, okay, why don't we all meet? And then once they met, and their mood was a bit, moderate, and they were a bit lower, he said, okay, all of you, what is your position? And then everyone started speaking. He said, no, why do you appoint one person who will represent your position? And so they appointed one person who was going to speak as a spokesman on everybody's behalf. And then he said, yes, what's your position? He said, our position is that everybody should recite Surah Al-Fatiha. That was one person who spoke. He said, is what he says, do you all agree with that? Does he speak on behalf of all of you? They said, yes, he does. He said, the same with the Imam. The Imam, when he recites, when he addresses Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Surah Al-Fatiha, it's there as a representation of everyone behind him. Do you see how he chose the timing to say that? All right, and he spoke with wisdom, and he chose the timing. Timing is key. Some people, when they wake up in the morning, do not speak to them until they've had their cup of chai. Don't do it. I know people like that. You tell them good morning, they'll tell you get lost. You say to them, how was your sleep? He'll say, get out my face. Things like that, they will. Because they're just not ready yet. They've just come back to life, okay? Give them some time, okay? Bichara has just probably had a nightmare, okay? Or we don't know, right? Maybe he was dreaming that he was in a beautiful world somewhere and then it's come back to life. But the point being is, look, if a person has just woken up and you know that his temperament is such that don't go near him until he's had his cup of coffee and he's had his anda paratha, let him do that. And then go and speak to him once his mood is better. Brother Yasser was reminding me yesterday. He says that there was, I remember that time, and he told me this, that when our fathers would go out to work, and at that time there was no instant messengers and there was no social media, and letters would come from Pakistan in writing, and sometimes you would not know what's contained in it. Maybe the message that someone's passed away, some message that's negative. He said that our mothers would be very careful. They would feed them first when they would come home, feed them, give them food, make them feel relaxed, and then they would say there's a letter there for you. Because if they received something of a sad news and they've not eaten, then it might be to their detriment. And so they would be very careful to consider the timing of when something was said and when something was communicated. One or two other things that we should also consider when we converse with someone is when someone is talking, don't disrupt them. If they're conversing, when a person is conversing, when a person is discussing something, there are thoughts and feelings that are flowing through those words and they're coming to you. But if you disrupt them in the middle, okay, you're not going to have a very constructive conversation. It's going to be a very disjointed conversation. He's not going to feel that you've heard him properly, and neither is he going to be able to appreciate your feelings, because he's still got his feelings inside him and he's not been able to express it properly. So allowing the person to fulfill what he said. Some people, they just disrupt because they just want them to know that they know it. This arrogant attitude. Oh yeah, I know about that. Oh yeah, I know about that. Or do you know that the Prophet, oh yeah, I know about the Hadith long time ago. Oh, do you know, brother, don't worry, I've studied that when I was like 5. Tayyib, Habibi, take a chill pill. Let him say what he has to say. It may be that he's excited to share it and he wants you to know about it. And some of our predecessors, they said that sometimes one of my students is telling me about something that I learned before he was born, but I pretend that I don't know it, so that he remains feeling that he's attached to what he's saying and he feels excited and he feels happy, but I don't want to destroy his feelings, so I don't say anything and I act as though it's the first time I've ever heard it. How many of us can do that? Act as though the first time. And I've come across brothers, mashallah, who I know they know. When they're listening to it from someone else, I'm like, man, are you really telling him about this? Are you crazy? This guy knows it. But you know what? They pretend, oh, mashallah, oh, right, okay. That's a noble gesture. Not to disrupt just because you feel that you know it. And don't be so confident. Maybe you learn something new in this process. Maybe he's relating something that you've heard already before, but there's a different spin on it. And that's why one of the scholars, he says, قُلِ الَّذِي يَدَّعِي فِي الْعِلْمِ فَلْسَفَةً رُبَّمَا تَعَلَّمْتَ شَيْئًا وَقَدْ غَابَتْ عَنْكَ أَشْيَاءُ. One of the poets, he says, say to the one who claims that he knows everything about philosophy and about anthropology and about politics and geopolitics, and he knows all the different sciences, and he says, take a chill pill. It may be that you know something, but there's a lot of things you don't know. There's a lot of things you don't know. It may be that, yes, you can claim that you know something, but there's a lot of things you don't know. And by listening properly and engaging, you will learn. So don't be disruptive when somebody is telling you something, and although you may know it from before, don't be disruptive. Attend to the person you're speaking to and listen to them with empathy, with ears of the heart as well as of the mind. And that is ultimately, which was from the legacy of the Prophet ﷺ, because when he was converse with someone, he would turn to them completely and he would allow for them to communicate with him in this very positive and in a heartfelt way, where he would show them that he's empathizing with what they have to say, he's listening to them properly, and their mind, his mind wasn't, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you know, although he had so many worries and so many other concerns, he would give singular focus to this person. That's from the legacy of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So these are some of the things that we can learn from today's session. Remembering, think before you say something. Remember how to say it. What to say has to be important. How we say it has to be right. Okay, and further, our tone has to be right, not to be too harsh. Our volume has to be right, and we also said that also the timing has to be right. And the last one that I want to say is jokes. A bit of humor is good in conversation. The Prophet ﷺ, once he made a joke, and one of the companions said, "Do you make jokes, Ya Rasulullah, and you're the Prophet?" He said, "I only speak the truth. Even in my jokes there's truth." Right? And we know that once an old woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and said, "Rasulullah, will old women like me enter Jannah?" He said, "No." And she got really upset, and he said, "Why?" He said, "Because they will enter young." Right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he would use jokes in a way to educate people, and it's a good tool. And that's why the Arabs, they say that al-mizahu fil kalami kal milhi fil ta'am, that jokes is like jokes in speech and conversation is like salt in food. Too much of it spoils it. Too less of it makes it bland. Right? So just the right amount. Sprinkle a few jokes here and there. But if you're always joking, if you're always laughing, then there's no conversation to be had, because what you're saying is not real. You just want to make a laugh of everything. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon some of these guidances and principles. Jazakumullah khair for listening, and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.